teenage angst, making sacrifices for what you believe in, and Jake Gyllenhaal. We're not talking about Donnie Darko. This is Spider-Man Far From Home. Spider-Man Far From Home is a 2019 superhero comedy from Jon Watts. You'll know Jon Watts from Spider-Man Homecoming, Cop Car, and tons of amazing comedy YouTube videos from when YouTube was still on the come-up. It stars Tom Holland, Samuel Jackson, Marissa Tomei, Zendaya, and Jon Favreau. So the premise is pretty simple. Peter Parker is going on a trip to Europe with his high school classmates. But while he's on holiday, will he able to enjoy himself, or will Spider-Man's responsibilities interfere? So as you guys know, when I talk about movies, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this time I will be talking about all three. That being said, let's talk about the good. The intro of the movie is snappy and very attention-getting. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't show you much, but what you do see really gets you hooked and makes you want to keep your butt in that seat for the whole movie. I'm sure you guys remember in Spider-Man Homecoming all of those really funny classroom videos that the school put out. Well, one of those student-produced morning shows makes an appearance in this movie, and it's damn funny. And that's the thing I really love about this movie and about Homecoming, is it really captures what it's like to be a teenager. It captures like what it's like to be in high school and the stuff that you have to deal with, and you know, all these little details like those classroom videos. Another thing about teenagers that they get right in this movie is the chemistry. This group of kids works together really well. You can tell they're friends in real life and they just really like each other, and that comes across on screen. And I think that's because Jon Watts is just so adept at handling things that revolve around kids. Whether it was Cop Car, Homecoming, or this movie, he really does stuff about kids well. He kind of makes you feel like you're a kid again when you're watching his movies. I really love the dynamic between Peter and Aunt May in this movie. I liked it even more than the Aunt May and Peter in Spider-Verse. Marissa Tomei and Tom Holland have really great chemistry, and they feel more like a mother and son than an aunt and a nephew. Jon Favreau is back in this movie as Happy. He's not directing the movie, obviously, Jon Watts is, but he's always great as Happy, and I love his dynamic with Peter in this movie as well. So like I said, the premise of the film is Peter Parker wants to go on a European vacation with his schoolmates and just have fun. He wants a vacation from being Spider-Man. And that's pretty understandable. Being Spider-Man would be exhausting work. Not only that, he and a lot of his classmates were part of Thanos' finger snap, or as they call it in the movie, the blip. So he and his friends blipped out for 5 years. He's finally back in our world and he wants to enjoy himself. And you do get a lot of that in this movie. I think the best parts of this movie are when he is just doing stuff with his classmates or the teachers. When he's just Peter Parker. The thing about most great Marvel movies is the stuff that happens in between the big CGI action scenes. Much like Homecoming and the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, everybody really likes the dynamic between the characters, the way that they act, the stuff that they do, the comedy, and that's what really shines in this movie. And the fact that this is basically a high school comedy, a romantic comedy, except a lot more wholesome and family friendly. And like those great 80s comedies, the music in this movie is just kick-ass. They always use the right song at the right time. Nothing ever feels out of place like Captain Marvel's music did. It's just a lot of fun, and the song choices are actually pretty cool. The music, the chemistry of the kids, and there's so much more that really contribute to this movie having like a really relaxed and loose and super fun feel. It's just really enjoyable. I love my dark dramas and horror and, you know, the crime stuff. I watch that stuff all the time. So when I went and I watched this, I just enjoyed myself. I had fun. It was fresh. It was lively. You know, it was something different than what you see in the MCU a lot of times. And that goes for Zendaya's character as well, MJ. MJ in this movie is my favorite MJ from all of the Spider-Man movies. She's realistic. She's how teenagers are. She looks like one, she sounds like one, she's sarcastic like one. I really like MJ's sense of humor in this movie. She's kind of dark and deadpan, and she kind of counters Peter Parker's, you know, optimism and always being bubbly and kind of awkwardness. They play off each other really, really well. And to me, she feels like an atypical love interest in terms of the MCU because she's smart, she thinks for herself, and she's kind of brave and, you know, goes out of her way to do things sometimes. I love seeing Samuel Jackson and Tom Holland work together. Their chemistry, again, like so many other people in this movie, is just great. So Spider-Man and Nick Fury, this weird vibe that they had with each other in a good way, it really worked for me. Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio was really, really good. You'll see a lot of things coming with that character, but you can tell Jake Gyllenhaal was having a lot of fun hamming it up as Mysterio. You know, Jake Gyllenhaal is a great actor, and he comes across really charismatic and interesting in this movie as Mysterio. So much so that I was hoping they weren't going to go the direction that I thought they would, because having read so many of the comics, I kind of had an idea what was going to happen. And like Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's books, things kind of went that way. And even though it did, they still kept it really fresh and interesting, especially with the reasons behind why he was doing what he was doing. I love the fact that they actually went to these locations and filmed. It's the first Spider-Man movie that's outside of New York, and I think that's really cool. It was time for a change, something interesting. So seeing Spider-Man doing his thing in London and Prague and Italy was really cool. I've traveled all over the world, and one of the only places I haven't been is Europe. I really want to go there, see the sights, see the art. I want to go to Florence and see the stuff about the Medicis, you know, all this really cool things. And this movie made me want that even more, because these are great locations, they utilize them well, and it makes you want to go visit them. There are quite a few action scenes in this movie. There's two types really. There's the ones where it's kind of like Spider-Man versus a certain villain, and there's also these big CGI things that you see in most Marvel movies. The parts where Spider-Man is in these intimate fights that are one-on-one and there's a lot of really cool things happening, I love those. And they reminded me of something like The Matrix, or the best parts of the first Spider-Man. As for the big action sequences and stuff, they were good. They were just like every other Marvel movie. Again, the thing about this movie that really sets it apart from all the other MCU movies is the dynamic of the kids. It's actually seeing Peter Parker grow into Spider-Man, not some teenage kid. And each movie, you know, he's had to step up to the plate more and more and take more responsibility and that kind of thing. So in the future of the MCU, I can see him being a huge part of it. I could see him becoming the guy who's kind of in charge and that kind of stuff. Obviously, that's going to take a while because he's still in his teen years and everything else. But eventually, as he gets older, I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. There's a lot of great ongoing jokes and callbacks in this movie, whether it be to previous Marvel films or to stuff that happened in Homecoming, or even things that happened earlier in this movie, and they bring them back with other punchlines, and it's really fun. The action in the movie, whether you like the little things or the big things, the geography was always on point. You always knew where somebody was in regards to the fight, where they had been, where they were aiming, all that stuff. And the times where you do get disoriented are on purpose, because you're supposed to be kind of confused like certain characters in the movie are at the time. Tom Holland acted his ass off in this movie. I love his emotional range. He's really convincing when he's sad, when he's happy, when he has to be serious. And I love the fact that he does a lot of his own stunts and that he learned parkour when he got the role of Spider-Man. He's a legit traceur, and I really appreciate that. Of all the guys who played Spider-Man, I definitely like him the best out of the three of them. I think he's a bit more natural as Peter Parker. He definitely fits the vibe. He has more of that vulnerability and those different things that Peter Parker has. There were actually a few surprise moments in this film that caught me off guard, where I said, wow, I didn't see that one coming. That's pretty neat. Sure, there are a lot that you did see coming, especially some of the big stuff. And as you guys probably remember, pretty much every single Spider-Man movie has ended with Spider-Man swinging into the camera, swinging by the camera, or jumping, you know, around the camera. It always ends on Spider-Man all up in the camera. But thankfully, this time it ended on a different note. It ended on a different type of shot, and that was another little surprise that I liked. There's a couple things I really like about the ending. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil the ending. I'm talking about something else. I don't spoil, and you guys know that. I just like the way that they did the actual end credits. This really cool stop motion thing that was like a highlight reel of their whole trip around Europe. And there are 2 end credit scenes, so make sure you stay for both of those end credit scenes, because they're both really good and they're pretty surprising. Some of the CGI shots in this movie are really, really good. They look pretty realistic, they look really cool, and they add a little bit of visual flavor. But that's pretty much it for the good, so let's talk about the bad. I did love a lot of the CGI shots in this movie, and I hated a lot of the others. The CGI, like most Marvel movies these days, because they're pushing them out so quick, was pretty weak in certain spots. And I still don't understand this thing that they do when they put Tom Holland in the Spider-Man suit, and it looks great, he's in good shape for it, he looks really cool. The suits are gorgeous, the costume designers are killing it. But then, even though he's doing a lot of his own stunts and everything else, they put CGI over the top of the suit. It's really weird and it's not needed in a lot of the shots. And while Tom Holland does do a lot of his stunts, there are some different wire work stunts in this film that really didn't look super convincing, like when he's jumping from one thing to another. His feet barely touch it, almost like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was a fantasy based on Chinese lore where they had people that were floating and flying and all that kind of thing, so it made sense in that film. Where in this one, which is supposed to be kind of grounded in reality, when he's kind of bouncing from object to object and it doesn't look that convincing, it kind of takes you out of the movie for a second. Every conversation in this movie is very typical shot, reverse shot. I say something to you, you see my face on the camera, you say something to me, the camera goes to your face, and it just goes back and forth like that. They never change it up. They never do different angles. They don't even do a lot of, wide shots, and then when something important is said, they punch in. There's not a lot of that. So the conversations are really generic, at least visually and stylistically. While I do love seeing Peter Parker's character growth and this arc that he's going from like this teenage boy or whatever all the way up to Spider-Man, the whole trope of saying, he's not ready and he's not prepared for this, which they did in the last one, and they even did in Spider-Verse with Miles, it's kind of getting played out and they need to do something differently. Even though that does help him show growth when he does accomplish something big or he makes a sacrifice or whatever, it would be nice to see something a little bit different. And seeing so many people trying to push him in different directions, sometimes very heavy-handedly and a bit ham-fisted, honestly, it kind of turned me off a little bit. Like, he's a teenager, he's in high school, so sometimes he's not going to be able to do certain things. Why are you riding him so hard? It's to add tension to the film, I guess, but I don't feel like it really worked out that great. As much as I love seeing Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, you're definitely going to see what's coming, at certain points in the movie, especially if you've read the comic books, which obviously a lot of us have. It pretty much takes that twist away, but again, the reasons behind it were kind of cool and interesting, and in some cases, kind of warranted. The music in the movie, not the soundtrack, the score, like almost every other Marvel movie, is so generic. I was watching this and nothing sticks out of my head. There is no Spider-Man theme. And as a matter of fact, of all the Marvel movies, period, the only thing that sticks out is that tiny little piece of the Avengers theme. Everything else is so generic. I don't know why they're doing that. Why don't they just make something more memorable for the different characters? It seems like they just don't want to, like they don't want something to stick or whatever, which is weird. Honestly, this movie is pretty much made for casual film goers. If you're a comic book nerd or you watch a ton of movies like I do, there's a bunch of stuff that happens in the movie that you can tell was done just for the audience, almost kind of pandering, really. There are certain moments in the movie that just don't make sense, and I think in a lot of those cases they use jokes to kind of cover them up, because if you're laughing and you're having a good time, you're gonna kind of ignore them. And I'll be honest, I did with some of them. I still noticed them. I'm not gonna say what they are because I don't want to spoil anything. I kind of said, I see what you did there. That was funny, but I still caught that other thing. And there are other moments in the film where there should be a bunch of stuff going on around certain characters. There should be a bunch of chaos, but for some reason, everything is clear and you have these nice little emotional moments or jokes that the audience, yes, they enjoy, but anybody in the audience who is into realism or logic or a stickler for details is going to be watching this and being like, wait a second, wouldn't a bunch of stuff be happening? Wouldn't this certain thing be going on behind them? Why would they have time to do this? Why is there nobody around? There's just so many times in this movie where that happens. Now, the last two things are really more about the trailer and how it pertains to the movie. In the trailer, there's this really cool shootout and fight with Spider-Man and a bunch of criminals and some kind of like a restaurant or a club or whatever. That's not in the movie at all. Why are they doing that? So they can add it to the DVD and say, ooh, there's new scenes that you didn't get to see. If they are, I think that's bullshit. That's really the only reason that could happen. It's not like in Endgame where they put certain footage in the trailers that wasn't in the movie because they didn't want to give too much away, which I thought was nice. Again, I think this is like a Batman v Superman thing where they take stuff out of the movie and then they add it to the DVD so they really incentivize you to go buy it. Something else about the trailer is it gives away so much of the movie. I'm glad I don't watch the trailers before I go to see the movies, guys, all right? So what I do is I watch a little bit of the trailer. If it looks good, I stop watching it, and then I go to see the movie, or I wait for it to come out on, streaming services or whatever. But I don't watch the trailers until I've seen the movie so that I can see how they executed it. And again, like I said, this trailer gives away so much of the movie, it's ridiculous. Anybody with any common sense or anybody who's seen a lot of movies, especially comic book movies, is going to be able to figure out most of the movie from this stupid trailer. But enough about the good and the bad, let's get to the ugly. So I saw this movie here in Qatar, and of course you know what I'm going to talk about. Censorship. This is like a PG-13 movie. What the fuck do you need to censor in this film? There were 6 cuts. I counted 6 cuts in this movie. Okay, you want to cut the part where they make lip contact and they kiss? Cut that out, I don't care. I see kissing all the time. You want to cut out titties? There's no titties in this movie. And even if there were, cut them out, because I see titties every day, I don't care. But now they're cutting out certain parts of conversations because they don't like what they're saying, or they don't like the fact that there's like certain little swear words like shit or bitch or whatever. It's a PG-13 movie, you shouldn't have to cut those out. There were like 4 people who brought their kids, these little babies, to the movie. And of course, I'm not mad at the babies. They're babies. They don't know what they're doing. They're crying and they're talking, making noise and all this kind of stuff. These kids are the reason that all of these censors are cutting all this shit out of the movie. There shouldn't be any censorship at all. Period. But there damn sure shouldn't be censoring of certain swear words, because if people don't want their kids to see that shit, they shouldn't be bringing them to the theater. All I'm saying is people here are grown-ups. If they want their kids to go to the movie, they'll let their kids go to the movie. If they don't want the kids to go to the movie, they'll tell them, no, you can't go. If they are grown-ups like myself and they're 42 years old and they want to go see a PG-13 movie, they should be able to go see a PG-13 movie with no cuts at all. So if you're watching this review from America or anywhere in Europe, hell, even Lebanon, you got to see the movie uncut. You got to see it how it actually was. And I'm an editor, so I catch these cuts all the time. And again, like I said before, these dudes are hacks. They have no finesse. They do nothing how it should be done. The cuts are so obvious. I'll be honest, I love the country. I love living here. I love the opportunities it's given me, but I cannot stand the censorship. And it's not just here in Qatar. There's all of the countries in the GCC that have to deal with this shit. It makes no sense. Treat people like grown-ups. Treat people like they have a brain, and do your cuts better, you hacks. Anyway, with all that being said, what is my score? Drum roll, please. 7 out of 10.